Sup fellas, Rebag UK here, going to be telling you about DayZ Settings. Fuck yeah, because we all want a perfect smooth game in DayZ. It's one of those bastard games which doesn't provide you with smooth FPS, so you've got to force it out of the thing as much as you can, squeeze it like that, as much as you can. Get every last bit of FPS. So I'm going to be telling you some profile settings you can change in the Arma 2 profile, Operation Arrowhead profile. And I'm also going to be telling you some launch commands which are very useful, and I'm going to be telling you in-game settings and which ones you should change and which ones don't really matter. So I joined the server to, play around with the settings. I already had the settings. I knew which settings worked for me, and I thought, yeah, I'll just go on, have a look, see if I can record the settings and things like that. And what bloody happens? 2 helicopters with gunners start circling me and just mowing into me. And it literally goes on for 7 blinking minutes. 7 minutes of just being bombarded by these 50 cal machine guns from the side of these choppers. Somehow, the DayZ tree saved my life. Trees in DayZ, don't underestimate them. They're bloody amazing. They're as strong as an ox. You can hide behind them. They deflect the bullets. You can shoot through the middle of them, and it's great. So anyway, I survived. So innocent bystander 1. Bandits 0. Right, so the first thing I'm going to show you guys is editing the Arma 2 Operation Arrowhead profile. So you do that by going to Documents, your documents, so it'll be my documents or something in some operating systems. Just click on that, then you've got Arma 2, you open that one, and you'll have either Operation Arrowhead, which is OA, and then you'll have Arma 2 if you've played Arma 2 as well. I haven't actually opened Arma 2 yet, so I don't have that in here. So you want to go to Arma 2 OA, because that's what DayZ runs off. So you double click that. Okay, if it doesn't open directly with WordPad or Notepad, just set it to open with, and then pick WordPad. It's quite simple. So you just open it. You've got all of this to edit. The most important thing in here, so you can see I go 920, 1080, refresh, change that, okay? It's the only way to do it here. Change your refresh rate to 120 if you've got a 120 Hz monitor. If it's not that, then 60 or whatever it is. Just set it I've got a 120 Hz monitor, so I've set it to that. The next important thing is these two here. So you've got GPU max frames ahead, which should be 1, okay? Set it to 1. And your GPU detect frames ahead is 1 as well. All these other settings here you can change in game, okay? So all of these post effect settings and FSAA, all that stuff, and dynamic lighting, you can all do it in game, so you don't have to worry about editing that here. So the next thing you want to be looking at is your launch commands, or launch parameters they're also known as. So these are basically commands that you put in, and when the game's launched, they activate and they'll do different things to the game. So if we go, the best way to do it, in my opinion, is DayZ Commander. It's a really good thing. You can go to install updates, install all of the different maps and all of this. It does it automatically, keeps the game up to date. It's really, really good, this. Can't fault it. So what you want to do using this software is go to Settings, and you'll have these settings here. So this bit here is the main section. You've got windowed mode if you wanted to maybe stream, it's probably good for that. Force DirectX 9, okay, so that's pretty, in my opinion, I don't see any difference, so I just turn it on because I then know it's performing maybe a little bit better, maybe a bit less strain on the CPU, a bit less strain on the GPU as well, so why not, it doesn't hurt. Then you get down to the additional launch parameters or launch commands. Here you have these settings, so I'm just going to put this one in now as well, okay? So that is another launch command, okay? And I had this command in there before, but in one of the more recent Arma 2 patches, they made it auto detect the number of cores your CPU has, so you don't need that command unless you want to be reducing the number of cores the game runs off. So get rid of that. Another thing as well, you don't, if you've got a 4-core processor or however many cores you've got, quad core or dual core, if you're putting this launch command in there, don't anymore, because in my opinion it causes more stutter, because especially with CPUs that have 8 threads, hyper threading and all that. I think if you've got one of those cores, get rid of that. and just let it do its thing, let it auto detect all the settings, and I think it reduces stutter in my opinion, so that's pretty important. The next thing is your RAM usage. The game is capped at 2 gigs, okay, so you're not going to get anything more than 2 gigs. So this max mem there, that's what you're going to get. If you set it to 8 gigs or 8,000 there, it will just revert back to this in the actual game profile. So that's the setting. This command here, it basically just means that the only world that loads is churnerous. So it preloads it. So if you join that world, you can get onto a server quicker, basically. So it's pretty useful, and you can do the same for other maps as well if that's something that interests you. It's not a massive thing. This here skips the intro. You just get into the game quicker. No splash. Now this is the video behind the menu. So when you join the game, you'll have this poxy video of some helicopter flapping around behind you, causing a bit of lag on the menu. That sorts that out, basically. And this no pause, if you happen to be running in windowed mode, so you can tick that there, it means that when you alt tab from that game, the game will keep running. So normally if you don't have that command there, the game will freeze. So you'll alt tab and you'll see in the background it's frozen. But this command here will allow it to keep flowing, so you can alt tab and look at maps and things with the game still running, and it's a bit safer. Right, so I'm now going to look at in-game settings. Okay, so currently looking at my DxTory video FPS, it is at around about 90 FPS while recording at 30 FPS. Sometimes increasing the actual recording FPS, so if I increased it to 60 FPS and recorded at 60 FPS, it can reduce stuttering. So that could be, if you're having stuttering problems when recording, try recording at a higher FPS. That could solve it. But I'm currently averaging about 90 FPS, and we'll look at the settings that I have at the moment. So these are what I recommend. Okay, so take a look at those. We've got texture detail high. In fact, these aren't this is something I was playing with, and you can adjust them, and I'll tell you how. But texture detail high, that's fine. Video memory you want as default, because you've set that already through the profile options. You don't need to change that, and the launch command even. The anisotropic filtering, this can be high or very high. It has very little impact on the FPS. I'll put that down to low. My FPS hasn't changed. Okay, so visually you can see the difference. If I disable it, you can see it goes blurry in the background. Put it on very high, it's clear, but it makes no difference to my FPS, so I'll leave that on very high. Anti-aliasing, these two here, they do affect FPS quite heavily, so I disable them. And to counter the effect that has on grass and things like that, you put the PPAA to FXAA low, and that just gives it a slight blur to the grass and just makes the grass look okay. As you can see in the bottom left here, the grass, you know, it's moving independently. It looks good, you know. It's not too blurry, it's not too crisp. It runs well. Terrain detail, this again, there's not a huge amount of effect, I would say, on FPS, but I keep it at normal because I don't actually notice a difference half the time. It's probably for long distance, but I just leave it. Object details, I like to have that high. I hate long distance buildings going blurry and things like that, and vehicles, so I set that to high. You don't get that problem. Shadow detail, this again, there's no difference between normal and very high. Okay, but there is a difference between normal and disabled. So if you disable shadow, you will gain about 10 FPS. Okay, so that's something worth keeping in mind, especially when it's daytime. It's not such an effect at night, but daytime it's worth disabling that if you do have FPS problems. If you don't have FPS problems, I would recommend putting the shadow detail to high, because that's the lowest shadow setting that there's no sort of glitchiness in the shadows and things like that. It's a nice shadow. It's pretty smooth, pretty straight lines, and that's nice. Post-process effects definitely off, because that causes quite a lot of blur and a bit of input lag as well, and obviously vertical sync off, especially if you've got a 120 Hz monitor. So there you go. That is my top sort of settings, I would say, for DayZ, especially for recording purposes. share this around to people you know that might be having problems and give it some support. I'm sure it will help out a lot of people. These are the settings I've messed around with, and I think personally they're the best settings for recording. I never really drop below 50 FPS. If I go into the middle of Electro or Cherno, I haven't seen it drop below 50 with these settings yet, so we'll see how it goes. So cheers for watching, guys, and tally ho.